Doing good. TV.
It's okay if I take everyone's picture. I
Mhm.
want to put it on the website when I get home tonight. All right, everybody say guacamole.
Guacamole.
Oh, come on. Guacamole. Thank you very much.
What if we don't like guacamole?
They say cheese.
Chocolate?
Chocolate.
Chocolate.
This bottle now. Spill on
I
me.
can't really believe this. When she was sitting on a tour boat or on a cruise ship that went to Mexico. I would love a chair that's not in front of me because I have to go out. So I'm just gonna. Is that you, Jerome? No. That's her. Seriously. Where do you want to be? Okay. And I'm just gonna make another chair for me.
Sit behind Randy.
I don't know what that's really saying.
I went to a thing last night. It was sitting behind. Would you like it to go on camera? Out instead? No.
Oh yeah.
So of course I got to giggle for you. Okay.
Okay, we got 1 minute. Yeah. Hey, Julie, can you just see if there's anybody up front that wants to come in?
I will.
Because we have the 1 minute. I'm going to start right off. Thank you.
Just so you know, he was recording a live talk.
Okay.
That
So,
camera is only you.
So I look at that one. Okay.
Anybody else I'm gonna get on that camera over here.
Got it.
So
Got it.
it'll be about that.
Okay.
Or talk to them.
Right. I'm sorry. I'm gonna start from one end to the other. Yeah, I want to keep it simple. I don't want you. We're not gonna do that.
Overachiever, sorry.
I guess they're okay. We're gonna start. I hear people. Let me just see if anybody coming in.
People. Good.
Okay.
Yep. I think Julie is sitting there so she can.
Well, go ahead and grab the chairs over there or in the front row there.
All right. I'm gonna start, even though there's people still coming in. Let me know when you're recording.
Recording.
Good evening and welcome to WMNF's Juneteenth 2025 panel discussion we call the State of Freedom Conversation. I thank all of you for attending this most important event. My name is Scott Elliott, Nathan B. Stubblefield board member, host of the Thursday Traffic Jam All Souls edition, and the moderator for this evening, okay? For many years, Juneteenth events have been close to my heart and very inspirational. And this year, instead of simply celebrating, we thought it prudent to contemplate what freedom really means in today's political and social climate in America. I just want to thank the WMNF staff and volunteers for helping us out today for this wonderful Juneteenth event. Our sound and video people are Mark Buffetti, Ed Lehman, Lisa Rauter, and also to Miss Julie Scheid for all of her incredible help. and our station manager for letting us have this event, Randy Zimmerman. Thank you so much. First, I'd like to introduce our panel, our wonderful, esteemed panelists. First, here is Zulika Fulen, Special Projects Manager for the City of St. Petersburg. She serves as co-chair of Movida with Mi Gente en Mi Pueblo, a grassroots Latinx nonprofit organization. Most recently, she helped launch the Youth Champions Initiative, bridging the gap between law enforcement and youth, including those with justice-involved backgrounds. Next to her is Chris Young. WMNF's Chris has written and produced hundreds of stories on topics ranging from education to state and local politics, science, and the environment. Amongst other accomplishments, Chris was part of WMNF's Newsroom's award-winning coverage of Governor Ron DeSantis' takeover of New College in 2023. He's the staff representative for the Nathan B. Stubblefield Foundation and is a member of the Tampa Bay Association of Black Journalists. Next to him, we have Eric Deggans. Eric Deggans is NPR's first full-time TV critic and media analyst, providing commentary and reviews for various NPR programs and platforms on their website. He is the author of the book Race Baiter, which examines how media can perpetuate dangerous stereotypes. Mr. Deggans has a long history in journalism, including roles at the St. Petersburg Times, now the Tampa Bay Times, and as a contributor to MSNBC and NBC News. He's also an adjunct instructor at Duke University and Indiana University. Next to him is Patro Mabili, a WMNF host on Community Speaks and the WMNF's 2025 Public Affairs Programmer of the Year. A member of the Fourth Estate with the Sunday Forum on WMNF, a radio activist for human rights, grassroots community service with a philosophy of diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. And finally, Isha Del Valle. Isha is an assurance senior administrator for the largest locally owned accounting firm in Tampa with 23 years of experience in administration. She serves as the board president for the WMNF Community Radio's board and has served as diversity and inclusion committee and volunteer committee chair. She is the host of the WMNF music program Latinx. Isha is the co-chair and co-founder of Mi Gente, Mi Pueblo. And that's our panel. And we're going to get started right away with our questions and regarding this. And we're going to start with Ed Deggans, and we're going to go around the table. Okay, Juneteenth is the symbol of the enforcement of the concept of freedom for formerly enslaved black people in America. In MAGA America, or current America, how do you see this freedom or the symbolism of freedom affected by current actions and ideologies of this administration and what they inspire?
No, this is for me.
Yes.
So, since I cover media and journalism and issues like that, and I'm going to be teaching this fall at Washington and Lee University as the Knight Professor of Journalism and Media Ethics. I have a lot of concern, and I'm just speaking for myself. Of course, I'm not speaking for NPR, but I have a lot of concern about how this administration is attacking news outlets and press organizations that it has decided it does not like, or coverage that it does not like. And this is exemplified by the situation that Paramount and CBS News find themselves in, where Paramount's trying to get government approval for a sale of the company that owns CBS News, but Donald Trump has filed a lawsuit himself personally against CBS News and 60 Minutes, and there's a sense that they have to settle that lawsuit and give Trump money for the federal government to approve a sale. And those two things, of course, should be separated. And so beyond that, the way in which Voice of America has kind of been dismantled, and then they realized when war broke out in Iran that, hey, maybe we need journalists and broadcasters who can speak the language and know the culture, and they hired a bunch of people back at Voice of America that they had laid off because they suddenly realized that service was valuable. And of course, the attempt to pull back funding from public media. So if there was a sense that this administration had journalism-related concerns or criticisms about what traditional journalism was doing, then we could have that discussion. But there is really a sense that they've just decided that there are some media outlets that they don't like, and those get government scrutiny, and those get their funding yanked. And meanwhile, they're talking about putting a relatively young news channel like One American News Network on Voice of America. So, that's the concern that I think those of us who are teaching journalism ethics and involved in journalism are really concerned about, a world where you're concerned if the government is treating news outlets fairly.
Thank you. Mabili?
Oh, well, I think that given that we've been celebrating Juneteenth, well, it became a national holiday last year, I'm surprised that this administration didn't move to unfederalize it. So, nothing they do surprises me right now. And we have to be responsive to it. And I think that the No Kings March was a good response. He hated it. But I don't know how much it's going to take to keep him from doing just outrageous things. Ever since the 1970s, they've been marketing their outrageous behavior. They will ask for donations, and they get it. And it's with social media, that's gotten even worse. There are people who are just everyday, ordinary citizens. If they're caught being racist online, people are sending them money, because this is, I guess, a way to bankroll what they're saying. But I think that we have to do the same thing. I think that we have to recognize that freedom is something that is important to every human being. And this is a holiday that we have to celebrate in the face of all that's happening, because our ancestors went through worse. And we have to, I think, make it not just a national issue, but an international issue. And, what we're seeing is just complete outrageousness. We have, that was a time when a president would get in trouble if they attack a political opponent. Now, this is a president that wants to attack Democrat-run cities, Democrats, and sends a message that this killer got over and that he can kill Democrats. In the first term, there were bombs sent to Democrats. So we have to recognize that they never really wanted change on the right, but if that's what the people want, that's what the people have to fight for, and we have to continue to fight for. The battle is never over.
Anybody else wants to add something?
Yeah, this is just cyclical. Unfortunately, I feel like freedom, but happy. But June, how far we've come, but I feel like I'm just generally. I think that a lot of us are just tired. We're just tired of fighting. We're just tired of fighting. There's this on pop culture. There's this thing on TikTok that's going viral. I don't know if you guys have seen it, where there could be World War III and a protest, and then as Black and brown people, we have our fans and we're doing our little our little dance because we're just it's not that we're tired of fighting. And I don't know if we've gone far right into the point where we've seen the boycotts, we boycott Target and all that stuff, but I don't think we're so far right to where we are risking our lives to regain that freedom again. Yeah.
What's interesting to me, to me, one of the lessons of Juneteenth is, because the whole story of Juneteenth is that even though slavery officially was declared null and void in America, it took a few more years for it to reach some Black folks in Texas. And we celebrate that date when they found out that they were free, even though theoretically they had been free before that. And I think the lesson for us is that freedom takes a long time, and just because someone says you're free, that doesn't necessarily mean you're actually free, right? And it may take a long time to get to that point, or a long time to get everyone to recognize that point. And, unfortunately, I mean, what scares me most about this moment is that I feel like people aren't learning from history. They're not looking back and seeing that we've been through this stuff before and seeing the way forward. Um, how could you have looked back at the civil rights protests of the mid 1960s and not understand the what's happening now? It almost feels like a replay.
Definitely.
So that's the most discouraging thing about this moment. It just feels like as a nation we haven't learned from our history, and we get 50 years past it and we try to pretend like it never happened.
And kind of piggybacking off of history, it's so important, especially now. A lot of people say, what's the quote? It's something along the lines of, if we don't remember history, we're doomed to repeat it. And we've been in so many situations where, especially with the Trump administration, where they're trying to kind of obliterate these markers of our history. You know what I mean? Like getting rid of the Black Lives Matter murals that we had from from 2020, 2021. I know that the National Park Service recently got rid of an exhibit that they had in one of their areas about one of the, I forgot her name. One of the civil rights leaders. And it's disturbing, and it's really, really sad because, again, if we forget the history that we have, we're doomed to repeat it.
Absolutely. Well, the next question I have is going to start with Patro Mobili. The concepts of woke and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace and in education, we've talked about it a little bit earlier, but seem to have suffered backlash of sorts in recent years. How can we turn these concepts or policies into what they were originally lauded for, which is equality and fairness in society?
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is black and brown people aren't going anywhere. We still are going to have jobs. We still are going to go to school. We're going to work, So, we just have to show up, and be there and speak up as we always have. DEI, I seen that a college administrator, I do believe, I believe it was here in Tampa, in the University of South Florida, who said, we're just going to change the name of what I do. And he got fired for that. But that's really all that is going to happen. People are going to find another way of doing the same job. And, I think that it's a big diversion for Democrats. For Democrats to come out of this election and say, everybody that the Republicans hated, we're going to hate them too. We're going to throw transgender people under the bus. We're going to support getting rid of some programs that have probably gone too far. What is going too far when it's a necessity? So I think that if you start embracing some of those concepts that the Republicans, just because you're scared, then you've already lost the battle. You've already lost the war. I think that this idea of anti-establishment system that is rigged against us, that's a powerful thing. And the Republicans used it to great effect, but they don't talk about it anymore. As if all of a sudden the system is fair for everybody. And clearly their policies, getting rid of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is wholly unfair. And I think that what we have to do in the response to all of this is look back to history, look back to 1920s when you were just a few years out of slavery, and the Ku Klux Klan was making a political comeback of sorts. They were getting very powerful because some of the people behind those roles were already powerful. And what helped the society at that time was to talk about economic populism, the fact that there's a vast inequality in society. That's still the case. That should still be our argument. That should still be the program that we embrace politically. And we can leave this reactionary stuff to them. Eventually, they'll be on the losing side of history. But history proves that economic populism has been and will always be a winning issue.
Anybody want to add something to that?
No, I will add for the
labeling of sorts of the woke agenda, the DEI, making it like the scary boogeyman out there that's gonna come and get your kids and turn them trans, or uh, people that are not capable of doing or completing a job, being able to do a job just like anybody else. They have the requirements. It's I think a way to go and fight against that is to continue to do community, to continue to build our communities. That's the main. I think the bigger hotspot, or the bigger argument back, it's from people that do not understand what is community. That's the main strength of diversity and inclusion. So yeah.
Community, yeah. I've always felt that one way this push against diversity or DEI has succeeded is that the very idea of what that means has been distorted, and a lot of people don't really understand what that means when you talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and it's been misrepresented and mischaracterized. And for me as a journalist, and what I'm teaching my journalism students is that diversity and inclusion is an important part of accuracy in journalism. You can't tell an accurate story if you don't include as many perspectives as possible on what happened. If you go to a shooting in a neighborhood and you only talk to the police and you don't talk to the people who lived in the neighborhood, then you're only going to have, one perspective on what happened there. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is an important part of bolstering other values. It makes news coverage more accurate. It makes scripted television more interesting. It makes academic life more comprehensive and stronger. It makes all these things better. And for some reason, some people have been convinced that these things make them worse. And one of the things I always tell people is this term diversity, equity, and inclusion can be used to describe a lot of different kinds of programs and a lot of different efforts to try and bring marginalized people into systems. And sometimes those efforts are well-intentioned, but they don't work, right? Or they're managed badly, they're implemented badly. But if your car breaks down and you take it to a mechanic and he does a crappy job repairing it, you don't stop going to mechanics, right? You just find a mechanic who you can trust, who will actually repair your car in a way that you need. So, so I think that's part of what's going on, is that people haven't necessarily understood what those terms mean and how there are examples of why DEI is terrible. Just might be an example of a program that was well-intentioned but didn't quite hit the mark. And the solution is not to end those types of programs. It's just to figure out how to do it better.
No, I completely agree. I think there's this myth with DEI that it's a bunch of unqualified minorities who are getting these top spots that are being taken from. Yeah, exactly. These mostly these white men are getting the short end of the stick because these spots are being taken. But it's not that they're lowering the bar. I think that it's kind of they're opening the door for these people who have been disenfranchised, for these people who historically and systemically have had these barriers into getting the things that a lot of people who don't have those barriers can easily get. So I think that this meritocracy that people are saying goes completely against DEI actually kind of works hand in hand with it. And it makes sure that these companies that are being led by people with a different variety of experiences.
Right.
Yeah, it just...
Can we wait to the end of the yeah. Sorry.
Did you finish?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just feel like, after the murder of George Floyd, we saw the surge of DEI, right? But can we be honest and be real that a lot of these institutions and workforces is just checking off a box, and they didn't really care, I was I hate to say a victim of that. and I worked for a nationalized organization for social services, and they were like, take your picture and tell me why DEI is important. But when I told them hey, you guys need to do a press release out about, how racism is not tolerated, and just kind of put a statement out to kind of solidify it, I feel like it was a big no-no. And later we had like executives from the organization, top national executives, come to our DEI meeting, and it was kind of like threatening, like, don't you dare like come up with these initiatives. And then a lot of us like became quiet because we didn't want to lose our job, and if some people were up for a promotion, they were just scared they weren't going to get it. And so it was, so I think it was a checklist for a lot of institutions and organizations and workplaces.
Yeah, I just to interject real quick about woke, I never understood how it could be misrepresented, and it has been misrepresented, the word woke. When I think of being awake, that means you are aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
So I don't understand how that is a negative. They turned it into a negative, and it's just frustrating to me that people use that word that way when woke should be something that we embrace.
Yeah, and, I
Correct.
mean, I had an experience similar to what you were talking about in 2020 after George Floyd was murdered. I give these public presentations based on the material in my book. So there were these places, these businesses that wanted me to come in and talk about diversity and inclusion and things like that. And I would always insist on having conversations with the managers saying, if you want me to come in and help your people talk about the problems with diversity that they already know exist at your company, I'm happy to facilitate those conversations. But if you want to pretend that you don't have these problems and you just want me to come in and give this sort of generalized speech
That part.
so that you can cut a check to me and then say you did something, I'm not interested in that. And there were, I had some places that were great about that. They wanted what I suggested, and we had those conversations, and I think it helped those organizations. But the other places, that wasn't what they wanted. And I was like, hey, I'm sure you can find some other brother out there who'll take a check and make you look good. But what I'm trying to do is give you and your people the tools to really talk about this and make some headway, because what I was telling them was, look, I can come in and talk about these generalized concepts that I know happen everywhere. But just talk to the people of color in your organization. They will tell you what the problems are, because they live with them every day. And if you're not talking to them and hearing those stories, I can facilitate that. But those are the people, and I'd say 9 times out of 10, even the white people know what the problems are. You know what the problems are. You just need to have to find the courage to speak it, and then and know that it can happen in a space where what's going to come out of that is constructive change. We're going to figure out how to get past these problems you guys are having in a way that everybody feels good about it, because that's what scared people. They were afraid that once they started that conversation, it would get lost in anger and insults and recriminations and guilt. And I think a big part of this anti-DEI backlash is white people being afraid of feeling guilty. And I've always felt guilt is a useless emotion. I'm not trying to inspire that in anybody when I'm talking about these issues. What I'm trying to do is get us to come together and figure out, okay, here's the problem. Let's figure out a way to solve it so that people who previously not been able to contribute can now contribute, right?
Thank you. Yes. Well, we're going to move on to the next question. This is very great. This is great, guys. The third question, Zalika, we're going to start with you. There seems to be a clear racial divide when it comes to immigration enforcement, exacerbated by the current administration's recently allowing a group of white Africanos to gain entry into the U.S. due to alleged racial discrimination against them in South Africa. Can you speak to this and what is currently occurring in our country?
Lord have mercy. How much time do we have? No, I'm just joking. This administration, boy, it's all about political theater than humanitarian concern, and that's an issue for me. How can you expedite white Afrikaners to, refugees, quote unquote, to come and kind of fast track through citizenships when you have black and brown people who are facing oppression and racial discrimination, not only in different international countries, but here in the U.S., So I just, like I said, I just think it's all theater. And I, in terms of like make America great again, the greatness has never been about us. It never included us. We as a people. I identify as Afro-Latina. My race is Black. My ethnicity is African, Panamanian descent and indigenous, and I just feel like my parents, they immigrated from Panama to the United States to live a better life for themselves, and they did it through getting the proper work visa, and then they did it the right way into citizenship. And I just find it sad because there's a lot of families out there who just trying to do the same things for themselves and their families. So there's definitely a double standard there, and I don't agree with it at all. Yeah.
Anyone else?
What concerns me about this situation, like I was on the editorial board of the Tampa Bay Times years ago, and we would talk about issues like advocate for having undocumented immigrants be able to get driver's licenses, which I thought was important. But I also sort of felt like we weren't talking about the real issue, which is I don't know if America can afford to create a workable immigration system where the people that we need to work in, fields and work in hospitality and work in construction and work in fast food, all the undocumented immigrants that we have that do important roles in all those industries, can we afford to make all those people citizens? Can we afford to have all those people take from the Social Security system and actually be able to get government benefits because they're treated like citizens? We have this weird, we've had for many decades this weird system in America where we tolerate people coming in and not being able to get the full benefits of being a citizen, but they work and they pay taxes. And if you live here in Florida, you pay consumption taxes, right? But those people can't get all the benefits from the government because they're not citizens. They may pay into the Social Security system, but they can't get Social Security benefits because they're not citizens. They help make that system stable for the people who can get it, but they don't get to participate in it. We're not having, neither party really is having a serious discussion about, can we afford to put aside this weird double standard that we have where we sort of said, we're just going to make it really hard to become a citizen. And so there'll be millions of people in this country who essentially work and help pay taxes, but don't get all the benefits that a citizen gets. And I don't say that to turn away from the really terrible things that are happening now, because of course that is really distressing. Mm-hmm. But I've always felt that one reason why it is easy for some politicians to demagogue that issue is because it's hard for America to have the conversation we really need to be having, which is, can we even afford to have a practical, workable, halfway sane process where the undocumented workers that we need to work in America can all become citizens if they, do it right. I don't even know if that's possible. I haven't looked at the data, but my hunch is that it would be really hard. And we're not even talking about it.
Yeah, that's under the rug, basically, yeah.
And I feel like, if I can interject, there's like a shortcut. So now you're seeing immigrants being criminalized and they're going to prisons outside the country and now inside. And then you have the prison industrial complex, right? Mm-hmm. So you have these privatized prison centers that are now having free labor. So it's like you're seeing the flip. So they're getting free labor. They're getting in the farms and stuff like that, but it's through incarceration, and that's the part that a lot of people don't get. Mm-hmm. That's happening right now.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice. Sure. Okay, we're going to work on to the next question. Thank you so much. This is going to Chris Young. The attacks on voting rights legislation in America is a hot topic when it comes to freedom. In your opinion, what is to be done to ensure safety of these rights that we're slowly, quietly losing?
Reaching out to your lawmakers, reaching out to your representatives, I can't stress how important that is. A lot of the stories that I do here at WMNF, I'm talking to these representatives and I'm talking to these people who are supposed to be representing the people of Tampa, right? Are supposed to be representing the people of Florida, are supposed to be representing sometimes the people of Florida up in Congress. And sometimes they get it, but they're always asking for more. You know what I mean? A lot of these people are sometimes asking, hey, tell your listeners to reach out. Tell them to send letters to their congressmen, especially sometimes these right-wing congressmen that want to get reelected. You know what I mean? They may be having these things, but they want to get reelected. So I think reaching out to these people, telling them, hey, make mail-in voting, mail-in ballots a priority. Hey, make sure that we have more polling places. Maybe I know Pinellas County was hit by storms last year and they lost a lot of polling places. Maybe make sure that, hey, these opportunities for people to vote are readily available. I think that's the first part of it. And I think the second part is also making sure that we're putting in candidates that people want to vote for. I think that sometimes people aren't excited about the opportunities that are offered to them in who's going to represent them in Congress, who's going to represent them in state government. I think sometimes needs are ignored. I think sometimes issues aren't as emphasized as much as they need to be in these situations where people are campaigning and they're going out. So yeah, I think it's a two-parter. I think it's pressuring our current lawmakers to make these voting efforts available, these mail-in ballots available, these voting hours longer, and also, yeah, making sure that people are excited about the people who they're voting for.
Thank you.
Yeah, and making sure that with time you keep having these conversations that are with your constituents, with your community members, to make sure that they're correctly registered to vote in whatever way it is, to not wait till last minute. Like to the year of voting. I know that we do all these things, but we leave these minimal things to the last minute, and I think we always are gonna lose a little bit of that chunk because of those little mistakes on our end for us to be active and show out on the polls. And in the same way, writing your representatives not only when it's time for elections, but throughout, consistently questioning them, because at the end of the day, yes, they're there to work for us. And they work for us, and we're their bosses.
I think, let me just interject. I like that idea of keeping the conversation going, because the biggest issue, I think, when it comes to voting and diluting our rights, diluting our power to vote, our voting power, is the redistricting. And this is something that they work on all the time. They're constantly scheming how to break up a neighborhood and disempower them, and that's their whole point. It's kind of hard to keep people from sending in a mail-in ballot. You could decide not to count certain ballots, but it's hard to steal an election that way, but you can do it by redistricting. And we have to be in on that battlefront at all times, because that's how they do it. That's how they're doing it now. And, just jumping back real quick to the immigration question, I think what should inform our politics, the politics that we're witnessing, especially coming from the right, coming from Republicans, is that there is this message of solidarity where we say this is a nation of immigrants, but the catalyst, it wasn't a nation of immigrants. This was a nation of colonists, settler colonialists. This was a nation of enslavers, these, and then, how do you explain my being here? I wasn't an immigrant, and so my forefathers wasn't an immigrant. And so I think that informs the politics. They think there's a sort of ownership. They reached into the British common law to write the Constitution. And that's the Constitution we're all living under. That's what they interpret every time they put a case in front of the Supreme Court. And as we see now, it's all political. It's no longer this referee. It's a political body now. And it's 6-2, And so I listened to the sister on the court, Ketanji Brown, and she's
6-3.
Oh, that's right. You're right. So one recused themselves, so that's why I'm still thinking about this. But the sister, Ketanji, she said the court is she said it's more than political. They are really on dangerous ground right now. So she's keeping a close watch on them, and we ought to do the same thing. And they doubling back around. They have the last word. The state Supreme Courts and the Supremes have the last word on redistricting. So it's a battlefront that we have to stay engaged in at all times because they're battling against us every single day, all day, every day.
I'm always telling lots of friends and family to please pay attention to your voting power. And what I mean by that is they're constantly changing things. They're constantly cutting people out of the ranks of voting. They're taking away, like if you have a mail-in ballot this year, you may not have it next year unless you pay attention to it. People are not aware that it doesn't recycle.
Right.
There's all these things that are changing. We have to be aware of our voting power.
Yeah.
And also to be calling our legislators all the time. I'm finding that the more I never used to call, and now I call more, and now I get responses from people. I actually get responses, like people emails from I forget what her name is, Luna. She's dogging me now. She's almost like stalking me because I've been calling them constantly complaining about stuff.
She went from
And so I
Mr.
realized the
Taste
power
Daddy.
that you have with that. So it's important to look at that too. So
Yeah, you do have to stay on top of it because, like, I do a mail-in ballot all the time, but one of the things I found is that if they think your signature doesn't match your signature that's on file, they might disqualify the ballot. So once you send in your mail-in ballot, you do have to check online and make sure that it
It's
was
there.
accepted and tabulated. And the thing to me about gerrymandering is that there are Democrats too who are comfortable with gerrymandering because it makes sure that they have safe districts
Yeah.
too. But I think what it does is it sort of spreads that apathy about voting, because if you're in a situation where you know a Democrat's going to win no matter who votes in your neighborhood, or a Republican's going to win no matter who votes in your neighborhood because it's been gerrymandered that way, then how do you get people to get excited and get involved in the political system? Right. And I think that's one of the problems that we have right now is like both parties are so connected to this gerrymandering system that it creates, people who don't vote that much are like, well, why should I even vote? And particularly if you live here in Florida and there's a super majority of Republicans in the state legislature. The governor has been Republican for decades. If you're a Democrat, how do you get people excited about participating in the system when they feel like it's so hard to have their voice heard? And gerrymandering is a part of that. And so part of what we have to do is even push the legislators that are not in power to abandon this gerrymandering and maybe risk their seats, but at least voters would feel like they have a voice more, and their wishes might be heard more.
Well, we have one more question for the evening, and hopefully we'll be able to have a little Q&A. The last question, we're going to start with Isha. How can we ensure that Juneteenth becomes more than just a historical commemoration and truly serves as a call to action for dismantling racial inequality, excuse me. Let me rephrase that.
Wait a minute.
Dismantling
signed up
racial
for the wrong discussion
inequality.
Inequality.
I'm glad everybody was awake for that one.
You paid attention.
I read it twice. I would say to continue to spread the knowledge. I am a person that is all about the power of community, the voices on the ground. Yes, we have plenty of ways to on social media and in the electronic world, right, to communicate faster or broader. But at the same time, the fight on that end for with propaganda, it's huge, and it gets your message. It has, I think, more chances perhaps to get lost in the shuffle rather than having continue to have those one-on-one conversations with your community members, to continue to tell the story to younger people, to enrich their knowledge of why is it important, and because education department, I don't know what's going on in history, they will definitely pick on perhaps not telling this story definitely right. Um, Support your grassroots initiatives and causes, that are dedicated to dismantling, that propaganda against the freedom and the justice and again, it was, keep supporting your Black and brown communities. That's again the fear of the MAGA. It's community
Yeah. Yeah.
for sure.
Anyone else?
How do we continue to celebrate and
Or to ensure that Juneteenth becomes an empowering tool.
I think that as long as we celebrate 4th of July as white people's freedom from the British king, then we have to make certain that we tell the same story about Juneteenth. I think that it's a contradiction when we have the 4th of July and we know that they were still oppressing us. So they celebrate liberty when only a portion of the country had liberty, and we have to continue to tell that story and recognize that, and we have to connect the dots. We know that the 13th Amendment left a codicil that says slavery is abolished except for the commission of a crime. And southern states jumped on it and said, well, we're going to continue to enslave you in jail. We're going to continue to change the codes, the black codes that we had already embraced even before slavery. And anytime you rose up, we're going to create even more stringent black codes that are going to police your bodies in this country. And so slavery in a lot of ways continued. A lot of people, I listened to my father's story even as late as the 1950s. We know that there was no slavery, but we know that if you walked around as a 15-year-old and you wasn't in school, you could be picked up by the sheriff and taken to somebody's plantation or somebody's fields and put to work all day, and you wasn't paid a penny. So, that's that's slavery as far as I'm concerned. It's a continuation of it. So these celebrations are meant to connect those dots and recognize that freedom is worth fighting for. You have to continue to fight for it because there are people in this country, especially in MAGA America, which means maniacs are governing America, that they are willing to do anything to roll back the clock.
Yes.
And
You
so,
know, and what he's talking about is this this concept called convict leasing that happened in the wake of the Civil War, where they said if they can convict you of a crime, then they can force you to work off the penalty at hard labor. And so that's when you start to get sundown towns where black folks couldn't be within the city limits after 5 or 6 p.m. because they would grab people off the street, they would throw them in jail, and they would force them to work off the fine. And, a plantation or a mine or a business would pay, the state $100 or $200 a head, and they'd get those people for the day. And if they got overworked in the heat, or if their mine collapsed, or if there was some safety problem, who cares? Because they'll just send you another convict the next day. So yeah, that's the way in which slavery was continued for many years. There's a great book called Slavery by Another Name that outlines all of this. And even in 1927, there was like 30,000 people in the South, mostly in the South, who were a part of this terrible system. And I'm convinced that it's why the movements of black people have become such a thing in American society, why policing where we go is so important, because it's been monetized, So, but you hit on another thing that I think is great is storytelling. I'm a TV critic and a journalist, and so I'm constantly either engaging in storytelling or constantly critiquing storytelling. And I think that's how we keep ideas alive, and that's how we pass down information, and that's how we make it live. So we just have to keep telling these stories of the history of Juneteenth and how it relates to where we are now, so that it stays alive for all of us, stays alive in our community, and we think about it in different ways. We figure out how to compare it to where we are now. And, you talked about some of the efforts to curb teaching of Black history in Florida and get rid of certain historical conversations. And I think, that's where that harm really comes. You stop telling those stories, right? And then all of a sudden we forget how it relates to where we are now. So for me, it's storytelling.
And that's so important because there's this concentrated effort, especially, Isha mentioned this propaganda, especially geared towards young people right now, to erase Black history, to replace it with, to make DEI a dirty word. I mean, you just, like, I scroll through TikTok and some of the stuff I see is just completely false and ridiculous, has a ton of likes, a ton of shares. Just, it seems like racism is something currently that is just being pushed in an unnatural way, especially towards our youth. So going back to storytelling, it's just so important, especially if you know anybody who's younger and maybe getting the bulk of their information from the internet or from podcasters or from like right-wing weird echo chambers. It's important to educate them. Tell them what Juneteenth is. Maybe, I don't know, take them to a class or something. Make sure that they're getting their information from a trusted source, from a library, from a trusted adult, rather than the depths of the internet, because it can be scary. And even not just young people, the people around you. Maybe you have a coworker who's like, I don't know what Juneteenth is, or somebody who's just not aware of kind of the history behind a lot of what Black people have been through. Just educate them. You know what I mean? Send them some social media posts, direct them towards a trusted news source, because again, there's definitely a MAGA centered effort to delegitimize a lot of progress and a lot of the sources and news that young people especially are getting right now.
I'd like to open it up if there's nobody else to talk on the panel. We have a little bit of time left for Q&A. Little bit. Somebody wanted to? Okay.
Well, I do want to say that picking it back on storytelling, it's been eye-opening for me to do ancestry research, because it's been important to know their names.
Yeah.
It's one thing to just say, oh, we had some people that were enslaved historically, but now I know their names.
Wow.
I know what they did. I know where they were at a lot of places, in a lot of ways, and that's helped me with the story. It's made me proud. I've seen where they've come from and how far we've come and how far we've slid. But it's important to know the story, but it's even more important to know their names.
Yeah. Tangible. So if anybody would like to come up to the mic and we have any questions at all for the panel. Okay.
I had a question that had to do with the concept of woke,
Mm-hmm.
and how that came about, young people. And I don't know if anybody here remembers the movie School Days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
School Days. Wake up. Yes.
Yeah, at the end of it.
School Days. Yes. Spike Lee film.
Wouldn't that didn't do the right thing too? Wake up.
Wake up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You need to be woke, it came out the streets, and how it has been hijacked, by people who, by the sheer definition of what woke means.
Well, I think what happened was with woke, and it's something that really is it's a spine. It really hurts me a lot to hear about woke being not a legitimate thing. I think it was equated with the idea of PC, which was totally run over by trucks, and I think they've equated that with PC, and there's nothing PC about wokeness. I mean, wokeness means that you are educated, you are aware.
And, or to
So-
make sure you are
Yeah.
be aware. Just
Yeah.
look around.
Right. Well, you.
Like Marvin Gaye said, or what's the song, Wake Up Everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Blue,
Harold Melvin and Blue Notes, yeah.
Yeah.
But
no,
it-
Teddy Pendergrass.
Teddy Pendergrass, yeah.
If you in competition, the main thing you want to do to defeat an opponent is turn their best attributes, their biggest advantages against them, right? And one of the biggest advantages that the civil rights movement has had is its moral authority, and this idea that it's on the right side of history, and this idea that when civil rights activists come to people and say, think about systemic racism, think about increasing diversity, think about inclusion and systemic oppression, that what they're advocating is selfless, and it is about getting right with history. Well, if you can create a conversation where that is being selfish and that is being overly picayune and being too sensitive, then all of a sudden you've taken all the moral authority of civil rights activists and you've turned it against them. And I think we really saw that pick up in the wake of George Floyd's murder, where people took that defund the police narrative and turned around and said, oh, now they want to take it too far, and it's changed the conversation in a lot of ways. That how do you come back from that? How do you get back to that? Because I think that's some people just view these debates as sort of combat. They view them in terms of strategy. And so taking a word like woke, which used to be very effective in describing activism for civil rights, and turning it into a dirty word is a significant victory for people who oppose those efforts. And that's kind of, what's happened.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions?
Can I ask something without going into the mic?
If you say it loud enough.
I can be loud.
Okay.
So when I first started learning about Juneteenth, the thing that had really struck me was the lack of urgency in getting the word to all of the people in the country. That you could get someone right across the country in 6 months and claim all sorts of land, but it took years to tell people that they were not slaves anymore.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm kind of wondering right now, and I volunteer for different organizations and stuff, but what is the urgency? Like, what is the thing that we should be feeling urgent about, in your view, for sort of continuing trying to reach some sort of equality and equity and inclusion with this? Like, what are the urgent paths or the urgent things that we should be paying attention to?
I would say continue to participating in things like this, continue to host events like this, and continue to host events of Juneteenth. And once again, continue to push the education, and the knowledge, and making it, broader and into not only into like the Black communities to know, but other communities to know. I know that a lot of Latinos don't know what Juneteenth is, and I know a lot of people that are very well educated on it. So there's always gaps within your inner circles that, again, it can expand more. I think especially these times, everything is so overwhelming because we're overwhelmed with everything that's going on. Like Suleika said in the beginning, like, I'm over it. We're over it. We're over it. It's so much. But talking to 2 people, 3 people is not, it doesn't go to waste, because again, it's a ripple, and a ripple will become a wave, and it has to continue. And it's sad that things like this take so long. It's sad that things like this, don't take the precedent and importance of what it is. I will say too that to lose the fear for our Black and brown communities, to lose the fear that we are a minority, because we are the majority.
Right.
And that's I think the first eye-opening thing that everybody needs to know is that we're not a minority, we are the majority.
Yes.
So,
I think that's I'm sorry, go ahead.
They can't hear you unless you come to the mic. I can talk loud too.
We can also, Scott, you can just repeat what she says.
Yeah, I'll just repeat what she says. Okay.
So,
Well,
yeah.
this whole thing with, about it reminds me of what happened with Martin Luther King Day and the fight that went on for years and years and years. Not, I mean, 'cause we used to sell it up. It's so funny. I'm gonna throw a word out here called another holiday up north that we used to celebrate called Black Solidarity Day.
Black Solidarity Day.
Yep. But nobody knew about it down south. Like we didn't know up north about Juneteenth either.
Right.
Okay. So, but it reminds me of how long it took to celebrate Martin Luther King Day.
It did take a long time to celebrate Martin Luther King Day. Yes.
It took a movement, okay, for everybody to start getting on board. Because certain places did celebrate his birthday, but not every.
Right.
It wasn't a national holiday.
Right.
So it took literally a movement to do
Yes.
I do think too that like it's easy to meet the moment that we're in right now with fear and anger, and I really think the opposite of that is to try and calm things down and try to calm the conversation down and try to model understanding each other. You know, saying to somebody, hey, I know that you don't agree with me, but can we find a way to talk about this that does not involve us yelling at each other? You know, I think, you know, the people who sort of oppose Juneteenth as a holiday or oppose the idea of woke or oppose the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, they want us fighting each other, and they even want people who disagree with them to fight them as opposed to try to talk to them. And I know it's really hard to do that in moments where it feels like the wheels are coming off of society. But I really think it's important to try and do that, you know, because I think there's a whole bunch of people. What I've often seen with journalism, for example, like journalism outlets are being attacked, and then there's people who are making these bad faith arguments because they want traditional journalism to come down. But then there's all these people who are kind of on the sidelines, and they're just going, okay, what's going on here? You know, I haven't decided yet. I just want to see how this plays out. And for those people, you know, to reach out to them in a way that doesn't have anger and that is about explaining things and is about, hey, you know, don't you not want chaos too? You know, don't you want to live in a country where people can't get scooped up at Home Depot or scooped up when they're at the doctor's office and taken somewhere without due process? Don't you not want that too? And, you know, you might be Republican, you might be very conservative, but you could probably say, well, maybe I don't want that too,
Right.
you know? So I don't know. I mean, you know, I think we're in the middle of a time of tremendous change, and we're all trying to process it, and it's going to, the sad thing about it is it's going to take some time to figure it out, and a lot of people are going to get hurt while that's happening. And we're just going to have to do the best we can to try and minimize that hurt, but also understand that, you know, at least for me, I've decided, the one thing I've decided is I don't want to meet that with anger. I want to try and meet it with understanding. I want to try and meet it with starting discussions. And then if it can't happen, then I'll just sort of walk away and try with somebody else, you know?
I'm inspired by this because what a lot of things you guys were saying in every question, it was always something about youth. And I'm inspired because now for Juneteenth, I think I want to do a youth day for Juneteenth. I think it's important that, you know, because usually it's adults that come to Juneteenth all the time, and we don't see the young people. And they're the ones that we're going to be handed the baton to. They're the ones going to be making the decisions when we're old. We need to start getting them educated and getting them to have empathy, because I think there's a lot of empathy lost in the world. I think that's very important, and I think I'm inspired by you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank you, the panelists, for coming tonight and giving their time and their expertise and their thoughts, which are very important. And I thank you all for being here, just giving us that great energy and the great questions. And I want to thank WMNF for allowing this to happen, because this is what public community radio is all about, is bringing people together and doing the right thing, trying to do the right thing in every situation that we possibly can. And thank you so much, everybody, for coming tonight. And really, thank you. And a blessed Juneteenth to everyone.
Yes. Likewise.
Okay.
Great job.
Thank you so much.